Good morning, Soulsbyville students. We're going to continue looking at some more instruments you can play here at Soulsbyville. And we did brass already, we did percussion already, and now we need to talk about our woodwind instruments. And woodwind instruments can include clarinets, saxophones, flutes, and some more uncommon instruments like the oboe and the bassoon. But the oboe and the bassoon are a little bit harder than, say, the flute, the clarinet, and the saxophone. So I have students play one of these woodwind instruments, flute, clarinet, saxophone, for a couple years, and then maybe your 7th grade year, if you want to try something different, you can switch over to oboe or bassoon. But today we're going to look at the clarinet and the saxophone. And I have a clarinet right here. This is the first one we're going to talk about. And before we start anything, the clarinet and the saxophone both require a piece of wood. And it looks like this. And we keep it in here. You can see a bunch of these in here. And this piece of wood is part of what gives woodwind instruments their name. And not all woodwind instruments use a piece of wood that looks like this, but most do. And this piece of wood is called a reed. And as you can see, it's just a little piece of, I believe, bamboo cut into this shape, just like that. It's very thin, it's very easy to break. So we have to be really careful with it, because to be able to snap it, all I'd have to do is touch it in just the wrong way and it could snap like that. Reeds must be wet for them to work. So before clarinet or saxophone players play, they must wet the reed. And we wet the reed just like this. And wood may not, as you imagine, taste very good. So first time we get a brand new reed, it tastes a little funny, but as it gets more worn in, you play on it a lot, it loses that taste. It just tastes like tasteless, doesn't taste like anything. So we wet the reed. And while woodwind players are wetting the reed, they can put their instruments together, because as you can see, it's a little bit more complicated than, say, these brass instruments, where all we do is put the mouthpiece on, and now you're ready to play. Easy as that. This is going to take a little bit more time. So for clarinet, we're going to take these big pieces first. Right here, and right here. And they actually fit together, like this. They have cork around these parts that connect. It's nice and soft so they can twist together. And these clarinets have to fit together a very specific way. Do you see all these holes? That's where we put our fingers on, and they need to line up. There's 2 little arms, if you look really close, that need to line up. So I'm going to take them out of alignment. Uh-oh. They are not together. That one and that one. Push it together. There we go. The 2 big pieces are ready. And I'm going to keep soaking my reed, but next we need the bell. And the bell looks like this. Fits on there. And hey, now it's starting to look like a clarinet, right? Bell, long piece. Next we need is the barrel. And the barrel looks like this. Pretty neat. Last piece we need. Just like the brass instruments have mouthpieces, the clarinet has a mouthpiece too. Except if you look really close, that's a big hole. If I try and play into it, nothing will happen. That's because we need to put the reed on right there. And then we have this, which is called the ligature, that holds the reed on. Remember, every instrument makes a vibration. And for woodwind instruments that have reeds, the reed is the thing that vibrates. So we'll put on the mouthpiece just like this. And we twist it on there, just like that. And next, we're gonna put the reed on just like this. Let's see if I can turn myself so you guys can see. Fits on just like that. But that's not going to stay there. We need to put the ligature on. just like that. And now the reed is held in place by the ligature. It's not going to go anywhere. And if you see, that reed lines up nice and perfect with the top of the mouthpiece, just like that. Look at the back. You can barely see the reed coming off the top. And there's our clarinet. Before I play it for you guys, I think we should look at some other clarinets. This is called a soprano clarinet. It's the most common clarinet, but there's lots of other different types of clarinets. There's alto clarinets, there's bass clarinets, there's contrabass clarinets. And let's take a look at a video. We can see a bunch of clarinet players playing together, but you're going to notice they have a bunch of different types of clarinet. Here we are. This is the Vienna Clarinet Connection. That's the name of the group. They're playing the song Rhapsody in Blue, a very, very famous piece by George Gershwin. And on both sides, we're going to see regular clarinets, call them soprano clarinets. And we're going to see a slightly bigger one called a basset horn, which is just another type of clarinet with a kind of a funny name. And then the biggest one, a bass clarinet, which is our lowest sounding of this group of clarinets. Let's take a listen. Cool, guys. Super neat group. I love hearing some clarinet quartets like that. That's 4 clarinets together. And look at all those different shapes and sizes and the different sounds they can get. I want to play a little bit for you, and then we're going to watch a professional. So let's get back to me, and I can show you a little bit more about the clarinet. So why don't we move this out of the way a little bit, and I can get right in front of you guys. Here we go. Clarinet. It's got lots and lots of keys. And keys are these right here that we can see right here. Lots and 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 lots. And the more the keys, it started out very simple in the early part of the clarinet when it was first invented. And they added more and more of these side keys to make it easier to play. For example, this and this do the same thing, but sometimes you'll need your left pinky on one note and then the right on the other, and it's just easier to go back and forth. Depending on the situation, you might want to use that right hand pinky. Depending on the situation, you might want to use our left. But speaking of keys, why don't we take a look at what they do? Let's push this down. You see it pushing down this hole down here? What about if I push keys up here? What does it do? It opens up these. So really all these keys do extra little bits on the clarinet that our fingers cannot reach. But what our fingers can reach are these main ones. The thumb, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Why don't I just play using these? That's it. But if I start using my pinkies too, I can hit lots more stuff. In fact, the clarinet is one of the largest of all the instruments ranges. That means it can play really, really low, and it can play really, really high. Example, here's our lowest note on clarinet. And I can play some high notes, but I'm not a professional. So I'll play some high notes. This is definitely not as high as it can get because it can get higher. So here's our lows. And higher. And it can go even higher than that. So this thing can play very low, but can also play very high. Very fun instrument. Reed, ligature, lots of keys, low notes, but also very high notes. I think it's time to take a look at a professional playing this. All right, students, this next one is a jazz band, and they call themselves the 8-Bit Big Band. And that's because they only play video game music. That's where they get the name 8-Bit. And this is from a Mario game, and the song is called Rosalina in the Observatory, and it features the clarinet. Isn't the clarinet a beautiful and really neat instrument to listen to? And it sure looks fun to play. And I can speak from experience, that was my first instrument, believe it or not. I play mostly saxophone now, but clarinet was my first, and I love it. I never put it down after I started learning it. Let's move on. I think it's time to talk about the saxophone. Next up in our woodwind lineup, we have the saxophone, and this is an alto saxophone. This is like the starter saxophone, even though there's a lot more. There's a soprano sax, a tenor saxophone, a baritone saxophone. The alto is the size that we start with, and then you can try others as well. And same thing as the clarinet, we have a reed. And you'll notice it's a little bit bigger. The bigger the instrument, the bigger the reed. And we must soak the reed. It must be wet before we play it. So again, I'm going to start soaking as we put this together. First, I'm going to look for the body of my saxophone, the big part. And by the way, I have this on a stool. You should never ever do this, because if this falls, it is a very expensive fix, but it's the only way I could get a good angle. So I'm breaking my own rule so you guys can see the saxophone a little bit better. But when you have your own, never do this. All right, body. Here's the body of the saxophone, and it's the biggest part. Sometimes saxophones will have this inside, which kind of helps clean it out, and I have one as well, but not all. Some of them haven't. Neck, we want to find the neck. And the neck looks like this. It fits onto the top of the saxophone. It's the curvy part that you've probably seen before. Fits on like this. And then we tighten down the screw to keep it from moving around. We want it straight. See how it's straight on there, just like that. No curve. We want it straight on, just like that. So it comes off. All right. Next, we want to find the mouthpiece. Just like on the clarinet, the mouthpiece holds the reed. So mouthpiece is bigger than the clarinet one as well. And it looks like this. I have a different kind of ligature than the clarinet one, so it's going to go on backwards. They make lots of different ligatures. They all claim to do different things. I just picked one that I end up liking. So here's the mouthpiece, and same thing, it's got a big hole. If I try and play on it, nothing's going to happen, because on a saxophone and a clarinet, the thing that vibrates and makes the sound is the reed. So nothing will happen unless we put this reed on. Now I like to put on the reed before it goes on the saxophone, because then otherwise it gets a little unwieldy. Hard to maneuver to put this on, because it can be a little difficult to put the reed on. It's like you need 4 hands to do it. We only have 2. So it goes on just like that, and now the ligature must go on. Now remember, I've got one of these weird backwards ones, so usually they go on in the front, but the screw on this one goes in the back. We want to get it all lined up before I tighten it down. So I'm going to make sure it's on there just right. Tighten it down. And we know it's on right when that top of the reed looks just like the back of the reed. Lines up just right on top. And the better lined up it is, the easier it is to play your instrument when you play these reed instruments like saxophone, clarinet. Here it is all assembled. Looks like that. Lastly, we need a neck strap, because on saxophone, this is getting awful big to hold in our hands, and if you want to be playing fast, we're all over the place, which means you could drop it at any time. So anything bigger than a clarinet, use a neck strap. And some clarinet players like to use a neck strap as well. Neck straps go on just like this. And then they hook onto the saxophone just like this. It's kind of like a guitar strap. If you've ever seen a guitar player, sometimes they'll have a strap on and it holds the guitar for them, so they don't have to hold it and try and play it. That's just one more thing you don't have to do if you want to play really hard stuff. And same on sax. This holds it for you so you can bring it up and play. Watch. I can just let the neck strap do all the work. Right? It'll hold it for you. And now my hands are freed up just to press the keys down. And we can see we've got all the keys right here. But before we go more into the saxophone, why don't we look at another quartet? Last time we saw a clarinet quartet of a bunch of different sizes of clarinets playing together. The small ones for playing the high notes, the big ones for playing the low notes, and saxophones have the same thing. So let's take a look at a sax quartet before we look more at the saxophone. All right, here we go. We have this sax quartet. They named themselves the, I'm guessing, Marici saxes, or it's Marici saxes. I don't know how it's pronounced, but they're going to play a song called Moon Dance written by Van Morrison. Let's take a listen. And let's take a look at some of those saxes, because I promised there were a bunch of different ones in there, right? We've got our alto that we were just talking about, but we also have a smaller one called a soprano. It almost looks like a clarinet, because it's so small it doesn't have to curve around. The whole reason these saxes are curved is if we straightened out the pipes, wouldn't it be too long to play? It would. Even on the alto, straighten it out, it would be almost down to here. So the soprano's small enough, we can just keep it straight, like a clarinet. And we have the alto, we have the bigger one, the tenor saxophone, and finally the biggest one that she's sitting down to play, it's called the baritone saxophone. When you hear those low notes, that's our lowest one, the baritone saxophone. I want to show you a little bit more on the sax, and then we'll end with one more professional performance of a couple of very famous sax players right now. Well, let's take a closer look. Just like on clarinet, we've got lots of keys again, and they all do different things. If I push that down, it opens up that hole. My fingers could not be able to reach that, so they add different keys to open different holes on the saxophone that our hands can't reach. But our fingers do rest on these pearl keys right there. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And we have a thumb key on the back right here that we can push down. I'll just play with no pinkies, just the first 3 keys. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. But with the pinkies, we can do some more. You can see that pinky pushes that down. That opens that up. And a bunch of pinky keys right here. We can play with our palms of our fingers right here on these keys. This thing is set up to be able to, so we don't have to move our fingers all around the saxophone. We can just keep them here and play all these different notes. It's all about opening up and closing different holes on the instruments to make different sounds. And that's the saxophone. Bring it up, we got the reed. That's what vibrates when we blow into it. The reed vibrates and makes the sound. Pro time. Let's take a look at 2 pro saxophonists. All right, so you'll remember that big band, that jazz band we watched when we were watching that amazing clarinetist play. It was the Mario one. Well, we're going to watch that big band again, the 8-bit big band. But it's one of their live concerts. So we're going to see them playing a live performance for an audience. And they're going to play the Pokemon theme from the show that was really popular when I was a kid. I don't know if it's popular anymore. And two saxophonists that are really popular right now, Grace Kelly and Leo P, will be playing. Leo P's playing that big baritone saxophone, and Grace Kelly will be playing the alto saxophone, the one that I was showing you just a second ago.
This is the theme song from the Pokemon anime, featuring Grace Kelly and Leo P. Give it up one more time for Grace P. Leo P and Grace Kelly. Thank you so much, y'all.
Wow, so that's the sax. But we also looked at the clarinet too. both awesome choices, and we're adding to that big old list of instruments that you can play once you get to 5th grade. We started with trumpet, then trombone, then baritone, then tuba, French horn, percussion. Now we're adding clarinet and saxophone, and next week we're going to do the last 3, the flute, the oboe, and the bassoon. That makes 11 different choices. I hope these lessons are making it easier to pick the one you want to start learning, and I hope it's not making it more confusing. But we'll continue on next week. We'll do our last 3 instruments, and I hope it gives you a nice idea what you want to do in 5th grade. Until next time, guys.